Trân trọng chào mừng toàn thể quý vị đại biểu và quý doanh nghiệp đã đến với hội nghị hỗ trợ nhà đầu tư nước ngoài.
To the conference on supporting investors in adapting to new business environment today. Before we start, I would like to tell you some kind of housekeeping rules for the online platforms. First of all, the conference is translated into Vietnamese and English. If you want to choose the language that you listen to, then you can choose the language on the right corner of your screen. And during the conference, please keep your phone muted. Ladies and gentlemen, foreign investment capital is one of the most important factors in business in Vietnam. But today, the foreign investors are facing a lot of difficulties because of the pandemic. One of the most important goals in Vietnam is to have a very effective FID strategies. So in order to help the foreign investors to overcome the situation and also to support them with the new environment, we would like to invite you and to join us in a conference today. Ladies and gentlemen, with us here in the conference, I would like to introduce to you some delegates from the organizers. I would like to introduce Ms. Cao Thị Phan, Deputy Director of Ho Chi Minh City Investment and Trade Promotion Center, ITPC. Mr. Vũ Tiến Lộc, Chairman of the VIAC. Mr. Châu Việt Bắc, Vice Director of the InChap. Mr. Tharabodea Sung Arachayawit, Vice Chairman of Thai Cham in Vietnam. Mr. Nguyễn Anh Du, representative from CIEM. Mr. Frank Van Ocean, CEO of Clean Dye Vietnam. Miss Catherine Chen, Director of Leon Lee International Limited Company. Mr. Frederick Orbeck, Senior Advisor of Baker and McKenzie Vietnam. And also welcome all of the business who take time out of your busy schedule to join us today. Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, to begin the conference today, I would like to invite Ms. Cao Thị Phan for the first presentation.
Kính thưa ông Vũ Tiến Lộc, Chủ tịch Trung tâm Trọng tài Quốc tế Việt Nam.
Mr. Vũ Tiến Lộc, President of VIAC. Mr. Châu Việt Bắc, Deputy Secretary of VIAC. Ladies and gentlemen, first of all, on behalf of ITPC, I would like to extend my warm welcome to the webinar on support for investor in the new normal. Ladies and gentlemen, Ho Chi Minh City is one of the biggest metropolis in Vietnam, which contribute more than 22% in terms of GDPs and 26% of national budget. In order for Ho Chi Minh City to achieve such achievement, FDI plays a very important role. FDI is becoming the driving force, which is creating a big push for the growth and the economic transformation of Ho Chi Minh City. So as you know, that 2021 is a year of the turbulence with lots of challenges and obstacles for not only the government, but also for the citizens and the business community, including FDI sector. However, in such circumstances, we still see some positive sign. The FDI cash flow still runs into Ho Chi Minh cities in the first 11 months of 2021. And the amount of capital, including newly registered, adjusted, and capital contribution reached $3.43 billion. equal to 90% of that amount in 2020. So this allows us to welcome and expect more positive signals in the time to come. Ladies and gentlemen, Ho Chi Minh City is carrying out preventive and control measure to combat COVID-19, and now we're focusing on, first of all, healthcare, and secondly, supply chain of materials and commodity, transportation, logistic. Number four is labor force, expert and managers between provinces. Number five is the corporations to solve all the initiatives of the big enterprises. And number six is share data between Ho Chi Minh City and other provinces. Ladies and gentlemen, the theme of Ho Chi Minh City in 2022 is safely adapt and flexibly and effectively control COVID-19 so that we can enhance the quality of urban, improve environment investment and jointly go hand in hand with businesses. And it poses us a question that poses many issues and many things that we need to solve in 2022. Despite hardship, however, there are plenty of new opportunities going forward, and I hope that all business will, accompany with the Ho Chi Minh cities so that we can utilize our resources to turn challenges into opportunities. And I hope that you still have placed your trust on us and choose Ho Chi Minh City as a place for your business expansion. And once again, may I wish you health, success, and a fruitful event. Thank you for listening.
Xin trân trọng cảm ơn bà Cao Thị Phi Vân.
Thank you, Ms. Cao Thị Phi Vân, for your presentations. And now I would like to welcome Mr. Vũ Tiến Lộc, the President of VIAC, on behalf of Organizing Committee for your opening remarks. Ms. Cao Thị Phi Vân, Deputy Director of Investment and Promotion Center of Ho Chi Minh City, representative leadership from foreign business associations, businesses, and leading experts. So thank you for taking your precious time to participate in our conference today, which is co-organized by VIAC and ITPC. As Ms. Cao Thị Phi Vân has mentioned, we know that the complicated COVID-19 pandemic, along with plenty of prevention measures, have led to many changes in investment and business cooperation activities of foreign enterprises in Vietnam. According to statistics from foreign investment agencies as of November 2021, so the overall foreign investment activities and capital in Vietnam paints a gloomy picture. In particular, newly registered capital and capital contributions was estimated 26.6%, with the newly registered account for 26% compared to 2020. However, the capital for foreign projects was estimated at $15.5 billion, down 4.1 year over year in 2020. Although newly registered and adjusted capital has increased, however, they're still lower compared to the same period. And the total number of foreign investment projects also decreased by more than 30% year over year. The investment environment in Vietnam is once attractive and promising destination for many foreign investors. Yet the pandemic and prolonged social distancing measure had left severe impacts on foreign businesses. At many conferences and consultation workshops, representatives of foreign associations and businesses expressed their concerns about the market, with plenty of obstacles that hinder their investment and operation. So in the third quarter, in the peak of COVID-19 pandemic, According to the data from European business, 80% of their orders were shipped out of Vietnam, and the Eurocharm survey shows that about 1/3 of its members turned to diversification strategies and moved production facility out of Vietnam. And according to a survey by the French Business Association in Vietnam, Vietnam-France trade decreased by 12.7% compared to 2020, and in 2019, many investors could not enter Vietnam to initiate their projects. More than 70% of French businesses have had to suspend operations due to COVID-19. Only 17% have not been severely affected. US and Germany invested businesses also suffered damages and heavy losses during the outbreak of COVID-19. And in Ho Chi Minh City, country's economic growth engine, businesses have been through a long period of stagnation due to enhanced prevention measures as the number of infection cases climb high. Transportation and production activities were delayed, workers lost their job, and the vaccination rollout was slow. As a result, foreign businesses couldn't operate in full capacity and consider changing market. However, with the timely adaptation to support businesses and open the economy, and with the mindset that this is a new normal. So now we are getting the momentum on the recovery roadmap, and the government is now planning a master plan, recovery master plan, and for economic development, which includes the rollout of new stimulus packages and investment incentives, as well as other facility support. And we hope that we will have some unique mechanism, to support businesses in such a tough time. Basically focusing on simplify the administrative procedures. Plan to resume international flight, to step by step recover the aviation market so that we can welcome foreign investor, leading expert. Then we also consider applying the vaccine passport so that we can bring new opportunities for the market, for the business community in general, and for FDI business in particular. And I think that it is fortunate for us that despite these unexpected circumstances, our businesses have already come up with plenty of innovative strategies and approaches. And we can see that through the pandemic, we have become more advanced in technology with faster digital transformation, which would still be a vague idea without the push from the pandemic. Then companies have more courage to explore new markets, new sectors, and they are now more resilient, in the adaptations to the COVID-19 consequences. And I believe that it is very important in the VUCA world that we're living right now, despite even if COVID-19 is under control. Regarding foreign investment, there are plenty of positive signals. We can see that we can see the improvement of project quality regardless of quantities, and large-scale projects are replacing small-scale projects in the mix. Green transformation, digital transformations, well implemented, and recent story of Lego investment into Vietnam with $1 billion project for the carbon neutralization is marked great milestone for the foreign investment in Vietnam, and they also, and the foreign businesses also plan with a more long-term vision to ensure the resilience to COVID-19. And we can also see that even though the foreign associations, businesses are quite struggle with their strategy going forward, however, they have affirmed and have the trust, confidence in Vietnamese market and the regulation of the government. And we are grateful as many foreign association businesses have affirmed their commitment to assist Vietnam in overcoming the pandemic. For us, it is a great motivation which demonstrates the unity of business community in the economic recovery period. And I'm truly appreciated as there are plenty of foreign investors and associations providing vaccine, technical support, lobbying to call for the assistance from other countries and international friends to support Vietnam in the fight against COVID via the vaccine provision, technical support, technologies, informations to help improve the capacity of Vietnamese businesses. So even if the pandemic continues to rage, as long as there are measures in place to ensure the stabilities as well as the program to recover the economy as directed by the government and will soon be applied going forward with the approval of the National Assembly of new stimulus packages for the businesses. I believe that Vietnam will still be a top choice for foreign investment in the long run. So from the perspective of Vietnam International Arbitration Center, VIAC, to turn Vietnam into a promising, safe, and quality investment environment, especially when Vietnam is looking forward a high quality foreign cash flow. So we need to ensure a better legal framework. And beside market factors, trade partners, we know that the improvement of legal framework can be considered as a key enabler for that growth. And with many disputes settled at VIAC, we found that to ensure profitable investment, investors need to be well equipped with necessary and complete information about the legal corridor in Vietnam, as well as the relevant regulations, consultancy, especially some considerations and appropriate dispute resolution mechanisms. And I believe that if all puzzles are in place, the investment landscape in Vietnam will improve. So then the foreign investor can have more motivations and more trust in our market. Dedicated to support businesses in dispute resolution, the VIAC and VMC Vietnam Mediation Center are prestigious destination that businesses, especially foreign enterprises, can place their trust on and help the assistant, the consultancy, when it comes to settle legal issues and conflicts during your operation in Vietnam. We do hope that you consider VIAC as your close partner, your companion, who will work side by side with you in Vietnam. So, ladies and gentlemen, 2021 is gradually closing with great losses that we have suffered, but also opening up countless opportunities for businesses in general and for foreign enterprises in particular. The activities of foreign businesses, even in the darkest day, always a bright color in the economic picture of Vietnam. And I hope that this color will become more and more prominent in 2022. With your feedback, opinions from the foreign business associations and experts and representatives of businesses from VIAC, ITBC at today's conference, and from the CEIM and other distinguished guests as well. I hope that you will get valuable and useful information to have a successful 2022 2022 with well prepared plan and strategy, a year marking the recovery period of our economy. And for sure that we will utilize the opportunities from the recovery roadmap and economic development program of the government. And I believe that going forward, I think that one who can anticipate all the changes and the new trends along with this program, with new opportunities, with partners and colleagues, will ensure their success in the future. And I hope that we can be your close partner. May I wish you a fruitful event with great health and take care in time of pandemic. Thank you for your attention.
Xin trân trọng cảm ơn ông Vũ Tiến Lộc.
Ladies and gentlemen, the pandemic has broken out and posed a lot of challenges for foreign investors in Vietnam to understand the difficulties that FDI are facing today. I would like you to listen to Mr. Tharabody Sang Aditrawit, the Vice Chairman of Thai Chamber of Commerce and Industry in Vietnam, for a presentation on the current situation.
Recording in progress.
Good morning. Good morning, senior management of VIAC, ITPC, ladies and gentlemen. I am Tharabody. I am the representative of Thai Chamber of Commerce and Industry in Vietnam. It's my pleasure to be here today. And I have to say that it is my first offline seminar in the past few months. I'm very glad. I didn't see so much people for a few months already. And then I have today, I will share you some of my slides, which I will introduce you about Thai investor in Vietnam and how is the impact to us in the last few months and how we survive and what we see Vietnam from now. I believe that in 2020, everyone already faced a really difficult time and never believed that 2021 will be even more worse. But at least we survived today. So I believe that whatever don't kill us, make us stronger. So we are stronger today. So I believe that in the past few months, I am one of the most impacted people among all of you because I lost 8 kilos. From no food restaurant open. So let me show you. Can you open my slide? So wait for a while. Do you have 5? I got. So in my slide, I have to say that among all investors in Vietnam, FDI, Thai investor has ranked number 9 according to the Q3 of this year. The total project is about 636 projects and about 13 billion US dollar. I can't believe that, even though the Vietnam lockdown in the past few months, I think there is a lot of new investment going on from Thai FDI to Vietnam. I have to say that a lot of M&A is happening now, maybe a few $100 million US dollar, which shall be announced soon in the coming days. And there is also, according to our statistics, there is even a few billion more US dollar is waiting for the license in coming days as well from Thai investor. So I believe that in the next few years, our Thai investor will be able to attain top 5 of FDI in Vietnam for sure. If the project get approval from Vietnam government, please support us. Sorry. Yeah, no problem. And according to our Thai Sham survey and statistics, I have to report to you that the total sale of Thai business in Vietnam is about 10.4 billion US dollar, which allowed 3.8% of Vietnam GDP. And we create about 86,000 jobs. And we have been very active in manufacturing and retail business. Next slide, please. Next slide. Yeah. A few garment factory have 6,000, 7,000 labor. They are the most vulnerable. Not only that, hotel business, food factory, packaging, hospital, unbelievable that hospital also get very big impact, and etc. Why some business has been doing so quite stable? For example, retail business with a necessity product and also energy business still doing well. And during that time, we also face that a lot of Thai investors come to consult us because most of the export order received during that time, they cannot produce at all. They have to find a lot of way to ship those exports out of Vietnam, how to move raw material out of Vietnam in order to produce in overseas. A lot of problem that time that we have to find a way and consult to our Thai members. And of course, the last one, everyone panic because they never know that tomorrow what happened to their factory, even bubble and seal. Everyone so panic, I have to say. The next slide is how we overcome. I believe that, among Thai business and Thai community, we did set up a group chat by using the mobile phone, like Zalo group, WhatsApp group, or Line group. Among inside, we have all Thai business there. And this has been the largest resource for us to help each other. For example, many factories, they found that they have a very serious staff who impact from COVID, and they cannot find medicine. So they put their request into the group, and every group who are nearby have a pharmacy or something, we go to find the pharmacy, and we can find, really amazing that we can find the medicine and send to support each other. These are very powerful communities that very useful for us to overcome. Moreover, the Thai embassy and Thai consulate has been very helpful, coordinate with Vietnam government to support us, prompt and very proactive. Another one, we also are short in food, but fortunately that many Thai corporate here are in food business. So they are using their logistics to supply the food for Thai business and Thai community in Vietnam, for example, CP Vietnam and those retail business. And then we also do some online seminar to update about the business and about how to manage HR to our members. And I have to thank, as a foreigner in Vietnam, I have to thank Vietnam government. You are doing very good job to support us for the very speedy vaccine to give to us. It's a very amazing rate that you can do 1 million vaccine per day. This is very, very, very best rate that we can see, and this help us a lot. What happened from now? I believe that now after October, right, Vietnam have to open again, and now everything, all the production are back to normal again, over 90%. And this is also thanks to the speedy vaccine that I say, and many regulations from Vietnam government to support in the banks and also impact business. Moreover, I can confirm to you that all the export that had been shipped in Q3, now everything come back and even more. And most of Thai investors now, especially in garment and manufacturing, they are planning for double capacity of their business. The next one that we are very confident that Vietnam will be back on track in high growth next year again after 8 to 90% of people get fully vaccinated, and we don't see any risk of Vietnam economy at all. Vietnam is, and the reason why we are so confident in Vietnam because Vietnam share the same fundamental like Thailand have in 1990 before, where we don't have anymore now. But Vietnam is having it because Vietnam having a growing local consumption, a lot of huge investment from FDI, more infrastructure to be committed by the government, 25 billion a year, and also export jump so fast. So all of these will help GDP of Vietnam grow so much in the future. That's why we are confident. And lastly, we believe that after next year, after Vietnam lift the quarantine or become less, I believe that 4,000 to 5,000 Thai investors look to come to Vietnam. And then also the tourists, few 100,000 who wish to visit Vietnam very soon in next year. So if I have to suggest that any one of you here want to do business with Thai business or else, I recommend you to be our member of Thai Cham. Will be able to support and help you to do business with Thai business. Thank you so much.
Xin trân trọng cảm ơn ông Tharabode Sin Adijawit.
Thank you, Mr. Tharabode Sin Adijawit, for your presentation. Ladies and gentlemen, to adapt to the new normal, foreign investors need to look for the remedies in such hardship distances and difficulties. So now I would like to welcome Ms. Catherine Chang, Director of Leonly International Limited, who have her sharing on how her company can adapt to the new normal.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. First of all, I would like to introduce about myself. I'm Catherine. I'm holding the director positions in Leonly Vietnam. And first of all, I would like to say thank you, Vietnam International Arbitration Center and ITPC for organizing the conference today. As an SME in Ho Chi Minh City, we also experienced a lot of difficulty during the COVID-19 since 2019. And we also one of the small, medium-sized enterprise that we overcome this COVID-19 with amazing job we have done so far. So today we very appreciated to be one of the people that can share our some experience as well as some contribution for our Ho Chi Minh City economy recover in the future. So Leonly International, we are Singapore enterprise. We have headquarters in Singapore, and we formed Vietnam office in 2011 with more than 10-year experience in Vietnam. We also gained our reputations in the regions and national. So we are also one of the member of Singapore Business Group and BCCI Vietnam, as well as Singapore Business Federation in Singapore. Our main business, we focus on energy. We also get involved in sustainable energies lately in 2020 and 2021. We are involved with wind power solar projects, and we also do biomass and energy commodity. We support other big brands to supply coal to the EVN group in Vietnam. We also specialize in consultancy. So we provide all the market entry and advisory for foreign entity to want to expand their business in Vietnam. We also get involved with logistics, and we also involved with trading activity in Vietnam. We have 3 subsidiaries in Vietnam. The first company is Leonly, Tri Marine, Mekong Logistics, and Lion City. Where Tri Marine, we provide all the service like coordinate with special permit for specialized projects. And for Mekong Logistics, we provide the transportation, especially for the route from the South Vietnam to Cambodia and vice versa. And we also get involved to transportation coal to the Duyên Hải 2 thermal power plant in the southern of Vietnam. Lion City is our company specialized in food export, and we do the trademark registration in Singapore in 2018. and we try to expand the business in this year. So far we handle quite big scale of projects. So we involved with more than 10 sustainable energy projects in the southern in Vietnam, especially the offshore wind power projects in 2021. We also try to secure the deal for worth on more than 400 million US dollar. And we also provide a lot of service and special permits for marine service. As you all acknowledge that COVID-19 has a very serious impact to economy, to the whole world, and especially in Vietnam. We believe that all the impact and consequences that give a huge damage to Ho Chi Minh City's economies. Especially, you can see that our Ho Chi Minh City's economy grow in negative number. And you also can acknowledge that the broken in supply chains. We also experience in shortage of labor. And very important and more serious is COVID-19 is impact very serious to our people health. So as the Vietnam data, we also can see that for 11 months of 2021, it have more than about 14,000 enterprise has completed dissolutions because of COVID-19, even though this number is down compared to 2020. And Ho Chi Minh City's expectation approximates the loss about 270,000 billion dong. So the impact and the consequences of the COVID-19 is very huge to our economy. So as our company, we also one of the enterprise that experience a lot of damage to our activity, especially when we do the consulting service and logistics service. When we discover the breakdown in face-to-face communication with client, one of the big gaps for us to connect with our clients. The secondly is we also experience the logistic fee is increased a lot because the prevention planning for COVID-19. So incur a lot of procedure, a lot of formalities, as well as it takes longer than normal. So it's also one of the factors that is impact to our poor cash flow performance this year. So in terms of recovery, so what an SME can do, we cover that during the COVID-19 situations, we are surviving quite well, and I can stand here and share some experience with you guys. So it means that we are quite successful up to now. And beside that, we also have some action plan to try to figure out what we can do and what we can sharing with other people. So in our company, we break into 3 different stages. The first stage is we call it back to new normal. The second stage, we try to explore new opportunities in business. And the last stage is how we can survive in the long run for business in Vietnam to carry out. So for the first stage, back to new stage, as you also awareness that COVID-19 haven't ended yet, and the world have witnessed a lot of new variants. For example, a few months ago, Delta is dominant in the whole world, but lately in November, another new variant is Omicron also come out. So it means that COVID-19 is more and more complicated in the whole world. However, as the enterprise, we also need to overcome it, and we have to find the solution to go with it for the long run. So back to new state, we also maintain the COVID-19 prevention plan, as well as we follow strictly with the government instruction in terms of bringing our employee come back to the office safely. And we also try to take advantage of technology to improve our communication internal and external to make us more flexible, as well as we optimize our working capability to be more competitive in the new tough life. The second stage, we try to explore our new business opportunities by we participate actively to the new area, which where we already have foundation or have the potential to grow in the future. And we also, at the same time, we organize our training section. We increase our employees' soft skill, hard skill, and we try to optimize our workspace, our services. So we try to launch the alternative service to provide for the new demands in the market. That is one of the very important stage that we think that it is very important for an SMEs like us. And the last stage is and the last stage is we also try to plan our long-term business. So we try to get more proper training as well as combine with the innovation in business. So we try to plan and budgeting our cash flow to make sure that it is working well in the future. We also try to increase our revenue based on the stable income from the current service and product. So we can maintain our company operation well. And we also make the always in the situation that's always in the changeable alerts where maybe other COVID-19 maybe go through, but maybe others challenges in the future. So that is all about our sharing for the section today. I hope that we also can contribute our small contribution to the Ho Chi Minh City business recovery plan in the future. Thank you very much.
Xin trân trọng cảm ơn bà Catherine Trần.
Thank you, Ms. Catherine Trần, for your presentation. Ladies and gentlemen, to provide a practical outlook for the foreign businesses in the recovery roadmap, especially for the foreign enterprises in the new normal. And now I would like to welcome Mr. Frank Van Orgen, the CEO of Hyundai Vietnam, for his presentation.
Good morning. Ms. Vice Director, ITPC, Mr. Director PIAC, distinguished guests and other speakers. It is very much my pleasure to be here today and to have the opportunity to share my experiences during the COVID lockdown with you. I'd like to start with a little visual. Because pictures say a lot more than words, I would like to show you who we are. So I have a short introduction video. We have a factory in Na Be province, to the south of the city. And we are what you would call a disruptive technology. That means we are very, very different from the established technology of dyeing fabrics in water. We dye in liquid CO2 and therefore have no water pollution whatsoever. Here you see these dyeing vessels that we use for this process and the way it is all done. One thing, of course, is that not using water for our dyeing means that our operators are not have to swim to work, like you can see in many of the established dyeing houses, dyeing mills. We do use some water, to be honest. We clean the fabric when it comes into our factory, and we need to often treat the fabric after dyeing with some chemicals, and in both cases we use water, but it's around 20-25% of the normal volume in this industry. So here you see the washing of the fabric when it arrives at the factory. It's often very dirty, and there are certain chemicals inside that are used in the weaving and the knitting process that we need to take out. So we do have also some water treatment to make sure that whatever water we do allow onto the environment is clean. Hence our name, Clean Dye. We also try to be not only a new technology, we also want to be a good technology. That means we want to be sustainable, and we also want to make sure we are good for our employees. Because if you do not touch all these boxes, you're, let's see, I need to, yes, sorry, I'll go back one, there we are. One slide doesn't want to come. Where is it? Here we are. No, I'm sorry. So as I mentioned, we are the first textile dyeing mill in the world that 100% uses this water-free and chemical-free process of dyeing polyester fabrics. Obviously, as such, the factory also needs to be commercially viable. Our shareholders insist on that, as you may well imagine. We need to be sustainable, compliant, and we need to be a good and safe place to work for our employees. Yes. A little history. We are one of the lucky companies that had the pleasure of work together with ITPC here in Ho Chi Minh City. Mr. Nguyen, he's sitting here. He was one of the guys present. Ms. Yuan was there as well. It was before I joined Clean Dye, so I'm talking a little bit out of other people's story, but I know that the owners of the company were looking around in Vietnam to establish this factory 2017, 2018. They visited a number of provinces, including, of course, Ho Chi Minh City, where they eventually met up with ITPC. ITPC delegation visited the Netherlands. They saw where the machines were being assembled in the Netherlands and had a chance to have a good exchange of information. Then ITPC introduced us to HEPSA. Then they helped us find our current location. And this all happened in a few months' time. So it really shows that if there is a will, then things can really happen quickly. And you know, as an enterprise, we were extremely happy and fortunate that we met up with ITPC and through them with HEPSA and all the other people involved. We opened the factory in 2019. We started scaling up really March of 2020, sorry, I should have been 21 this year. We started our second shift in May of this year. We started our first shift in July of this year. So everything looked really nice. And then the lockdown came in July. So a week after we started our first shift, the borders between provinces closed. Since we are in the south in Nha Be, half of our workforce lives in Long An. And that meant that from one day to the other, half of our workforce was not able to come to work. Decisions were made with very little or no time to react or prepare. It was obviously a very frantic period. There was a lot happening, and the authorities were also looking for the best way to solve these things. And so we had to scale down from 3 shifts to a barely 2 shifts operation. And then I think it was 2 weeks later, the 3 on-site rule was introduced. Again, I remember we had like 24 hours to get everything organized, buy tents, get mattresses, all that stuff. And then I, again, still very grateful for the employees, my middle management, because they formed like a task force to get everything organized, talk to the employees, make people aware. There was a lot of confusion among the operators and the employees. And we managed to keep 1 shift running. Obviously, capacity down to 30%, but still, I'm very happy that we stayed open. It is also one of the very positive effects that we had of the lockdown. Our company definitely emerged stronger after the 3 on-site period. The dedication that a lot of employees showed in that period is still quite remarkable. I'm very, very sure that in the Netherlands, I would never been able to find this sort of dedication. The other thing that I found very positive is the incredible strong performance of the vaccination program. Once the decision was made that this was the right next step, the implementation of it was amazing. I have never seen something like this before. As was mentioned before, everybody was vaccinated, regardless of if you were Vietnamese or not, and that's also a very, very nice aspect. I think Vietnam learned a lot from the lockdown, and I saw in decision making that the country is not afraid to make decisions to go from COVID-free to live with COVID and accept then what comes with those decisions, which I find very powerful. And of course, there was the medical support and that we also experienced in our area. The quality of local support with F0 cases. We have F0 cases now. People get everybody is doubly vaccinated, but you still get infected at home or in your area. So the overall support at the moment is quite good. So these are definitely positive effects. Some things that were perhaps less ideal. A lot of extra cost, obviously. We paid allowances to our employees that stayed on site to reward them for their loyalty and their dedication. We had to obviously buy tents, mattresses, food. Testing cost, that was quite a considerable cost. Lots and lots of tests. We had to pay rent for the space where we had our camping, Clean Eye camping. And of course, we also decided to continue to pay the salaries of our employees that were forced to stay at home. The 2 weeks of minimum wage was obviously not going to be a good thing. So we paid the salaries regardless of people were able to come to work or not. But that's a lot of money that was spent. The other thing, at times there were many different authorities, and it was not always clear what the rules were that we had to follow. Very little coordination. And the other thing, of course, rules were issued relatively late with hardly any time to implement. Now, I can understand a lot of it, why it is, but if there is any learning out of this period, these were the ones that hampered businesses a lot. We can do anything as a business, but we need time to plan. And everybody who runs a factory or an industry knows that you need some time to make it happen, but then we can do anything that is required. So these are my thoughts on this, my contribution. I could spend a long time with numbers, but I thought I'd keep it to my impression and to the way I have experienced this period. It's something unique. I've been in manufacturing and production industry for 40 years. This was definitely something I've never experienced before. So from that point of view, I'm happy that I was there and went through it. Have a nice day and a continuation of this day. Thank you very much.
Xin trân trọng cảm ơn ông Frank Van Ooyen.
Thank you, Mr. Frank Van Ooyen, for your presentation. And now to follow up, I would like to welcome Mr. Nguyễn Anh Dương, representative of Central Institute of Economic Management, CM. He will present the economic forecast in 2022, orientation toward attracting foreign investments, and a suggestion to attract foreign investor on how to develop appropriate plans for adapting to the context and situation.
Vâng, xin kính chào các quý vị. Trước tiên thì tôi xin cảm ơn Trung tâm Trọng tài Quốc tế Việt Nam và đã mời tôi tham gia cái cuộc buổi trình bày ngày hôm nay. Kính thưa chị Cao Thị Phí Vân, kính thưa ông Nguyễn Vũ Tiến Lộc, tôi xin phép trình bày những cái nội dung chính liên quan đến những góc nhìn của cá nhân tôi trong thời gian vừa qua, có quá trình nghiên cứu cũng như quá trình trao đổi với kể cả các cái cộng đồng doanh nghiệp, các đối tác nước ngoài, kể cả cấp chính phủ và cấp doanh nghiệp về những cái nội dung liên quan đến thu hút đầu tư nước ngoài trong bối cảnh mới ở Việt Nam. Thế thì cái phần nội dung của tôi thì nó tập trung vào có mấy cái điểm chính. Trước hết là cái bối cảnh kinh tế thế giới. Cái thứ hai là cái nội dung liên quan đến các cái triển vọng kinh tế của Việt Nam theo một số cái dự đoán của các tổ chức quốc tế. Và những cái nội dung tiếp theo đó thì nó sẽ liên quan đến cái cơ hội và thách thức đối với đầu tư nước ngoài trong cái bối cảnh mới theo đặt hàng của ban tổ chức, và cuối cùng là những cái định hướng mà chúng tôi.
And the final thing is some kind of orientation for you and for us in the new context and supporting the foreign investors in the COVID-19. So first of all, for the overall picture of the international context, so we can see that you can see that there is a trend in recovery, the economy, especially in the main environments and like EU nations. Like yesterday, you heard about the US economy has improved. So that is why the United States have also planned some scenarios in the future so that they can improve their profit and reduce the inflation in 2022. With the momentum, you can see that it's not only in the UN nations or USA, but it's also in the Asian nations. And for the last some years, you can see some kind of very clear recovery in Asia, especially in China and ASEAN nations. And with that, when you see the statistics, for example, the import and export statistics in the first quarter and the second quarter of Vietnam, you can see that the export statistics is very higher than before. So with that momentum, and other nations in Asia also in the momentum of recovery very actively. So Vietnam also profits from that momentum. However, we cannot just based on the traditional ways of recovering, but also need some new ideas and also new opportunities. And the first one is about FTA. For example, foreign investors in Vietnam, I think that you have planned a lot and think about this a lot, and in the future you also have to consider more issues because Vietnam have done a lot of FTAs and maybe some new contents have been put into the FTAs. For example, from the 1st of January in 2022, we will have a new FTA coming into effect. So the role of the foreign investor is very important, and also when we assess the importance of FDI, it is needed to based on the data. Speaking of the customs only, Vietnam may not be improved in export. At the same time, from the perspective of Vietnam, when foreign investors have done a lot of investment into Vietnam, you can see that how the foreign investors can contribute into the Vietnamese environment and support the local businesses to maintain their business. That is also one of the goals that we are trying to achieve. Talking about CTPP, like in China, they have submitted the document to join this agreement. Maybe England, they also have talked to the TCTPP. Lately, China also expressed their desire to join in this organization. That means we will have more partners, we will have more commitment, and the opportunities for Vietnamese investors in particular and the foreign investor in general is very positive. The second story is about the digital transformation. So this is not only about something that we always talk about, that is the installation of servers or the international data. But it also related to the regulations to protect personal information. And this is very important from the perspective of the investor. However, the issue of digital transformation is very broad, also related to the exchange information between the government agencies, so that the investment can be done very quickly and smoothly. And this investment will be done to support and promote trade between the countries, in order to ensure the government's digital transformation also linked with the business digital transformation. And this kind of transformation also relates to other stories. For example, in Singapore, they have joined hands with Chile and New Zealand to have some kind of digital transformation. And it is not only about the trade, but also about no paper trade, like e-commerce, like one-door commerce, and other kind of intellectual properties on online platforms, and AI, and protect the price of the customers on online platforms. Those are the issues that we have to deal with and consider in the future in Vietnam. And the final thing is about the idea of green recovery. And Vietnam have committed to conduct this idea in COP26. So first, maybe we will need to organize new models in the economy, like circular economic models and also climate change resilience models. And when is the appropriate time for conducting green recovery? So in Vietnam, we think that the green transition has been done right in the process of economic recovery, not only after the completion of economic recovery. So you need to do it right now when the recovery process is going on. However, the activities of the foreign investors are still facing difficulties because the development of the COVID-19 pandemic is still very complicated and it's unpredictable. So if you look at the statistics of the COVID-19 expected cases in Ho Chi Minh and Hanoi, you can see it is very high. Although it is different from the statistics several months ago, but normally we can see that we are having the new normal and we have the resumption of some kind of business. However, the development of COVID-19 in the world is still very complicated with new forms of the virus, and some kind of airlines have been disrupted, and this will affect the business in general. The second thing is we can see a very high competition, not only in security, but also related to business, trade, and technology. And those issues are not only about competition between the governments, but also affect some kind of investment or FDI. Before 2020, you see that some governments raise some kind of policies to force businesses to move out of their country or maybe to move to their own country land. So the activities of the investor is not only about the consideration of risk and profits, but also about the policies that some governments may have interrupt them. So in the new context, you need to consider this kind of policies. And the final thing is about the risk of macroeconomic instability. So like Vietnam,
doanh nghiệp có vốn đầu tư nước ngoài tại Việt Nam cũng là một bài toán rất phức tạp. Bài toán phức tạp ở chỗ câu chuyện là tỷ giá của Việt Nam. Có bây giờ sẽ ít nhất là sẽ có một cái độ linh hoạt tương đối hơn so với những năm trước. Câu chuyện thứ hai là cái đà tăng giá.
Second thing is that for the price rise,
cái yếu tố thứ ba là câu chuyện liên quan đến lan truyền từ least
is the risk from China, Italy will be picking bond and some of the property group, whether or not it will affect the world economy. So this is some of the factors that may affecting the financial picture or international payment or FDI flow that ins and out of Vietnam. And in reality, in the meantime, we can see that the activities of the investor is heavily affected by the supply chain corruption. And from the survey of NTT data at the end of December 2021, we can see that 83% of transport units experience disruption in the supply chain in 2021. For example, like in the EU market, we know that there will be some risk regarding transportation when we exporting in EU, or lack of containers over the China economic crisis. So we do think that if we want to export to European market, we may consider the road transportation. So need to buy the transportation service provider to meet your demand. Another thing is that the story regarding to the insurance company named Euler Hermes. Their surveys also show that the supply chain disruption could continue until the second quarter of 2022. So at least 6 more months, so that we need to come up with a plan to encounter with this. And another point is to increase cooperations in against the climate change. So I would like to focusing on the Mekong Cooperation. So the context here is that if the Mekong Delta is considered to be facing lots of risk, for example, sea level rise, therefore the development of sustainable infrastructure in Mekong Delta plays a very important role, and this is not only the job of Vietnam but also other countries in adjacent to the Mekong Delta. For example, how to ensure the energy mix in this area so that we can less dependent on the petrodam. And another reason, surveys also mentioned the saline institution in Mekong Delta. It's not about the hydrodam, but also other factors, well, like river exploitation, over exploitation. So if we're talking about the urban development, then we need to talk about sand, where we can find sand, where it's the source of it. So those are some of the points that we need to consider going forward. And during our discussion with the US or Japanese or Korean investor, they also shares the concern. They also share the interest, which is focusing on the renewable energies investment. And as you know, that the implementation of COP21 also affects the PDP aid of Vietnam to ensure appropriate energy demand, which is toward the increase the renewable energy mix, increase the renewable energy share in the energy mix. So the next point I would like to touch on is some of the economic forecast for Vietnam in 2022. So overall, indicators, we can see that there is a positive growth in the Vietnam forecast, around 6 to 7%. And the recent surveys from ADB is around 6.5%. However, this number is largely, which is totally different from years before that. And the fluctuations regarding this number is quite high due to the pandemic as well as the policy to prevent a pandemic. And secondly, is the access to international market, not only about export, but how can we connect with foreign investor, to meet, to visit, go to their place, or to call for investment from other countries. So I think that this plays an integral part as well. And another point is that how we can, update and communicate with the foreign investor, as there's a lot of changing. There's a lot of changes in different markets. So how can we have timely updated information to ensure the best investment opportunity for Vietnam? And then we can think of economic development and growth. So the first point that I would like to emphasize regarding the opportunity for foreign investor, first of all, is that Vietnam is located in the area that has a high prospect for growth, for recovery. And this recovery is not only for Vietnam, and we're not only based years by years, like compared 2021 to 2022. So it's not basically depend on the numbers. However, it is also the recovery of Vietnam associated with manufacturing capability in Asia, which is driven by two factors. First of all, is the growth rate of each economy in the Asia, including China, Japan, Korea. And the second factor is the connectivity between economies may be improved with the implementation of RCEP agreement. And for example, the interest of a foreign investor in this agreement is quite high. And from the survey that I mentioned earlier, Japan and China is two of the economies can earn great benefits from RCEP the implementation of RCEP. So, which highlighting the recovery map is not only depends on each of the economy, but also how this economy can cooperate with each other. For example, between the Vietnamese enterprises with the Korean enterprises, and from then the ripple effects can be created. And for sure, the rest, whether or not Vietnam can capture or can anticipate these opportunities. So the point I would like to emphasize here is that we are now located in the area that have a high potential for economic recovery. And as Mr. Vũ Tiến Lộc already mentioned, some of the foreign investors may plan to diversify their portfolio, their business line. However, from the perspective, especially in such circumstances, if we can solve the supply chain disruption, then the Vietnamese economic recovery, along with the regional economic recovery, may contribute greatly to the success of business. And the second point I would like to mention is regarding the opportunities from the FTAs. So, like earlier in 2013, 2014, the impact of this FTA is quite considerable compared to other FTA, for example, like TPP or the EU EVFTA. But with the RCEP, and especially at this moment, it will bring a lot of. It is a meaningful agreement, especially in a time of economic recovery, so that each businesses can make use of every single opportunities from this agreement. And the second factor is the competitiveness in the market. How you can compete with your rivalries? So during such hardship, for sure, the one who best adapt to the environment can achieve the great success. And last but not least is the Chinese economy. They have new approaches, for example, regarding the quality standard. And I think that this is also an opportunity for Vietnamese enterprises, and especially the FDI enterprises with a high science and technology level can meet the demand. For example, the product quality of processed food in Vietnam. So it's not just about meeting the domestic consumption, but also you can see that we can meet the demand from the Chinese market as well. And last but not least is the new space for the economic activity. So I think that it is more relevant to the circular economy, maybe in the industrial sector, as some of other presenters already mentioned, regarding into the non-water treatment technologies for dyeing. So I believe that it is a very important point. And regarding circular economy, especially for organic agriculture, I believe that it is one of the next new growth engine for Vietnam economy, especially when we want to have less impact on environment to ensure the green development and sustainable development. So I think that the circular economy in agriculture is a very suitable model. And I know that the foreign investor already look for new technologies from you and suggest new projects associated with the circular economy, and not only in terms of agricultural manufacturing, but also how we can recycle, the leftover from the production, microbial fertilizer, for instance, or land, restoration. So those are some of the few examples I think that would contributing greatly to the sustainable development. And I believe that Vietnamese Vietnamese enterprises can contribute to that as well. However, I still believe the foreign investor hold the keys to recognize or to realize the plans. And I think more importantly is how the public gonna react to these policy changes. So those are the opportunities So if you see in the pinky classes, in the rosy perspective, then whether or not it is suitable, to invest in Vietnam. First of all, we need to mention about the evolution of COVID-19 and the labor supply. We were speaking of recovery, speaking of production, but if we don't have labor, how can we realize that? So the thing here is that we need to recover from COVID-19, but we need to ensure our workforce in time, to meet the demand. And via our discussion with the business community, plenty of companies also try to, reaching or seeking for new source of workforce. And some of the, the workers, they have a plans, to come back to the big city maybe after the first quarter of 2022. So I think that the Vietnamese government play a very important role here to initiate or to adopt a policy to ensure a stable income and a safety for work in the COVID-19 pandemic. And actually, during the prevention of COVID-19 and the economic recovery period, Vietnam and foreign business communities already have some dialogues to how that we can help them, to improve, to gain back their momentum. And for sure, it's not only from the side, but also we also receive plenty of initiative from foreign businesses. For example, the foreign business community already have directly dialogue with their own government, to how they can assist Vietnam to provide vaccine for Vietnam. And for sure, we need that is quite recognizable. And I think that the foreign business is plays a very important role in the economic recovery, not only for their benefits, but also for mutual benefits between their business and Vietnam environment as well. And when we're speaking of the recovery, I think that the point here is that how Vietnamese government can create opportunities as well as to create favorable conditions for the business, for the foreign enterprise who has go hand in hand with Vietnam in tough time, to develop further in the future. And secondly is the level of determination in how we can implement the economic recovery and development roadmap. And I believe that there are plenty of stories circulated around this topic in June of 2020. But now when things are under control, and now we can see that governments as well as National Assembly also have some opinions on this program. And experts say that this program should be implemented earlier, maybe at the end of 2022, then the economic recovery rate will be much better. So saying so doesn't mean that we are wasting our opportunity, but it also means that we need to be more determined, to implement this program. And it's not about the responsibility of the management agency, but we should look at the benefits of the foreign business who is operating here. And I think that it is one of the points that the foreign business also have high interest in. And the third story regarding to the the investment reform. So besides creating favorable conditions, to attract the FDI flow, so how we can, the way that we can reduce the investment cost is very important, very crucial to foreign businesses as well. For example, procedure regarding land and other things or investment. The next thing I would like to mention is the import and export procedure. And as we can see now, there are more and more stringent and strict market with higher standard for the import products. So from Vietnam point of view, what is our solution, to promote export? For example, recently, when China implement a measure, to reduce seafood import from India via the packaging testing and maybe five, print, it's a footprint of COVID-19. So if we look at that story, then how Vietnam can react if Vietnam is just like India, fall into that situation. And then another point I would like to mention is the investment environment reform. So we not only focus on the traditional model, but we also focus on the new one. So what are the new spaces for the investor? Just 2 days ago, SIM has organized a workshop, and in that workshop, we do have the participation, especially we have the participation of Thai Cham here. So they highly, interested in Vietnamese market, but they don't know, they cannot find a way to enter into our market. So in our workshop 2 days ago, the question that raised for us is whether or not, Vietnam has to consider, to expand the ownership of foreign businesses in the enterprises. As you know that the foreign ownership is limited at 70%. For sure, there will be some other specific regulation, but the average 30% already, whether it meets the purpose of the foreign investment or not, or whether it help the domestic enterprises to attract the foreign capital or not. And last but not least is the trust in the linkage between the FDI enterprises and domestic enterprises. In recent years, we have plenty of discussion and dialogues that produce plenty of positive results, focusing on creating a better linkage between FDI and domestic enterprises. And for FDI enterprises, for themselves, they're very actively, in working closely with domestic enterprises, and vice versa. Domestic companies are willing, to meet the demand. And those assessments, for example, regarding import, most of the opportunity is for the foreign investment companies, and it can be implied that the domestic enterprise cannot make use of the FDA. However, they doesn't take into account the development of domestic enterprises in line with the development of FDI enterprises. Maybe these domestic enterprises, they cannot export, directly to the European market. However, they can work with the FDI enterprises, and then these FDI enterprises can export to other markets. And it is forecasted that in this year, the export turnover maybe is more than 330 billion US dollar, and which highlight Vietnam on the export map. And last but not least is the effort of Vietnam, in adapting to the export market. And I think that is a very important factors. So in the context of cooperation and investment, I do believe that domestic enterprises play a very crucial role. And I do know that the Vietnam government also have policy, to support them. But if your ownership is too high, if you just look at the ownership, rate, then it does not reflect their real contribution to the Vietnamese economy. And some of a conclusion, for example, like the domestic enterprises cannot earn benefit due to the invasion of FDI enterprises. And I think that is not true. But we need to look them at the bridge, to help connect domestic companies with the foreign markets. And I think that the cooperation between FDI enterprises and domestic enterprises is very important. And last but not least is some of the solutions for economic recovery and development. For example, healthcare, some measure regarding social welfare support in terms of workforce, technologies, and the interdisciplinary cooperation, and then public investment incentive, administrative reform. But another point I would like to mention is that the new initiative in investment promotion is very important. We can learn from the digital transformation from Korea by utilizing these online platform, or we can see that the investment promotion recently mainly revolves around the healthcare. For example, in Costa Rica or in Holland, in Korea, many and plenty of activities happen in the healthcare sector. And I think that is not about the sector, but the more important thing is the tools that we use, to connect businesses. And I think that is a factor. That factor is very, important in our economic recovery roadmap. And last but not least, digital transformation for sure is very important, but it is not everything that we need to concern in such a context. Because through our discussion with leading experts and businesses, there is an expert's point of view that if we meet each other via online platform, it only brings benefit if both sides already have trust, have confidence in each other in advance. Therefore, the business matching, the networking still emphasizes the trust between two sides rather than the tools that we use. So now I would like to end my presentations and thank you for your listening. Thank you, Mr. Nguyễn Anh Dương, for your presentation. Ladies and gentlemen, to ensure a safe investment environment for our investor, we need to have some measure to protect them. So in order to have a better, understanding of legal framework, to protect their legitimate interests. Now, I would like to welcome Frederick Burke, who is Senior Advisor of Baker McKenzie, who will have presentations on this topic.
Okay, thank you very much for the kind introduction. And thanks to VIAC and IPTC for hosting today's event. I don't think we have too many people in the room, but we have some good people in the room, and there's a lot more online, I think, who are learning from our discussion. I also appreciated very much the two speakers before. My presentation will be very, very different. It'll be about law, how you use the law and contract to protect your interests in investments and trade with Vietnam. I'm Fred Burke. I was the managing partner for the law firm of Baker McKenzie in Vietnam for many years. I started with the firm 35 years ago and arrived in Vietnam in 1991 and came to the Rex Hotel, which was operating then, and heard aloud about Vietnam's bright future. Well, Vietnam had a bright future then, and it still has a bright future now. It's going very well. We say the fundamentals of the economy are still very attractive to foreign investors. It's mostly good news, but there's a lot of things, as Dr. Locke reminded us, that we have to pay attention to continually improve the foreign investment environment, to continue mobilizing it for the domestic economic growth. So I'm going to talk about really two areas. One is just the situation now for foreign investment. And then second, what kind of mechanisms should you watch out for in your commercial and investment dealings to protect your interests? I think a lot of this is based on our recent experience with COVID, but it also goes back to SARS and MERS and other pandemics that we've had in the past that have actually prepared legally many investors and traders in Vietnam already. So they already do some of these things. So what do I want to say? Okay, so I actually spent September and October in California and San Francisco. And when people were talking about investment overseas, especially in Southeast Asia, they were talking much more about limiting their exposure to potential weak spots in the supply chain. People are very, very keenly aware that the supply chain, if any link in the chain breaks, the whole thing falls apart. So supplying retail shoppers in the run-up to Christmas this week and next week was a big discussion. And back in September, October, Could they get the goods from Vietnam and China and other places where a lot of goods come from in the US market? And now, as a result of that discussion, there is a very different focus on so-called resiliency to be able to withstand the next COVID. After we get Omicron, was there going to be something even worse than that? So what they're doing is they're thinking about automation, robotics, artificial intelligence. Are these ways to onshore and take back the so-called jobs and the other economic activities that go with all this sourcing overseas? So we cannot take for granted that the old model of exporting from low cost labor jurisdictions like Vietnam and other Southeast Asian countries to the US, that we cannot take for granted that will continue forever. Vietnam is already trying to get up the value chain, doing very well with companies like Samsung and Intel and their ecosystems to improve the sort of the quality of investment and the sort of the status of it. But it doesn't come easy, and a lot has to be done still. And a lot of that has to do with legal issues that I'm going to talk about. Let's see. There's also the issue going forward of how to balance public health and economic activity. What you saw from the previous speakers was the measures that were taken were often very expensive and frankly unsustainable economically or financially over a long period of time. So we got through that period. How is the balance now? Now we have 1,000 people dying a day in the country, and then is that a cost that's too high? So politicians and lawmakers around the world are debating that very issue, and everybody's going to have a say in it because it does matter about what people think there. So next. In terms of protecting your investment, it starts right up at the planning stage. Even before you sign an investment agreement, you have to look about where you're going to invest from. What is the counterpart investor for Vietnam that has a good treaty relationship with Vietnam, good financial, good investment conditions? And that has a lot to do with treaties. Treaties like you heard about the RCEP. There's also the CPTPP, which I'm very keen on getting the U.S. back into. Those are really important to look at the different treatment you might get in a worst case scenario. If your investment ends in a dispute, does the treaty provide any recourse? So it's a planning mechanism now to understand what the treaty provides for you. But it also may be a liability to look out for. For example, in the CPTPP, there's very strong environmental protection provisions, as well as labor law provisions. The U.S. Was instrumental in making sure that treaty had the so-called freedom of association for workers. EU was very keen on that too, in the EU FTA. And so that actually, for a lot of investors, that's a scary thing to think about. That you could have a labor situation in Vietnam like in Cambodia, which is a little bit more unpredictable and unstable. So that's the kind of thing. It's not just good things in the treaty. Sometimes there are obligations and liabilities there too. But the point is, there should be detailed agreements in advance. And the best example of that is right outside our door here in Ho Chi Minh City at the Rex Hotel, the Metro project. I remember looking at some of those contracts years ago saying this will just end up in delay, because the contracts were not specific enough with the contractors. They just said, if we meet a problem, we'll talk about it. And we'll have friendly consultations. Whereas if I think back on the Fumi 3 project, it was an energy project, and we represented Siemens as a contractor. That the contract was so detailed, hundreds of pages of contingencies, what might happen. If this happens, then that, and if this happens, then that. And here's who you go to ask if this happens. So it took a long time for the parties to negotiate and deal with those hard issues up front. But that's just a lesson you have to take away. Otherwise, we end up with these 10-year delays like we're having with the Metro. Okay. Yeah, sorry. Let me go back, not forward. Okay. Yeah, okay. So then there's this issue of investment protection insurance. Some of the treaties actually have protection of investors against expropriation by a government, whether by administrative means or other means. So even a change in law that deprives somebody of their business, that can actually be a claim made under the treaty. And TPP was big for this because it had the concept and investment for investor versus state dispute settlement. So in other words, the investor itself, if it felt that its investment was being confiscated by the state, could sue the state in international court. That's a big deal. Most states don't like that, and it was not popular. But for businesses, we like that very much because we don't have to go back to our own government and have our own government get in a dispute with the host government for the investment. There are many treaties called investment protection agreements, which are G to G, and the only recourse is G to G, government to government. What you want as an investor is really investor-state dispute settlement. Even though it's very controversial, look for those treaties that have investor-state, not necessarily G to G. I've got a changer, so I can change it. I think, yeah, let me do that. Okay. And okay, we'll talk about. Yeah. No. You're going forward. I want to go back to the forms of investment protection. Yeah. Okay. So good. So okay. So here's some considerations. You can either go to arbitration, which is not obviously different from going to court and having litigation, but there's other steps in both contexts. Before arbitration, some people will consider mediation. What's the difference between mediation and arbitration? Well, mediation involves one mediator who is appointed by both parties to informally resolve their dispute. It's not a binding settlement. It's not a binding decision that he makes, but that mediator should be well versed in the areas of law that are under dispute. So that's become very popular. Vietnam is introducing a mediator system, but there's still some steps to do to make it to be fully implemented. In the meantime, Vietnam's arbitration system is very well established. I participate in arbitrations on the tribunal and on behalf of parties regularly. And I can say I much prefer it to going to court because the arbitrators tend to be very well educated. They're very aware of global trade. There are a lot of transparency. It happens quickly because the deadlines are met thanks to the good secretariat at VIAC. Things really do move along, even though there's some delays sometimes. So that's my general sense in most contracts, whether it's a trade in goods or investment contract. If you can go to arbitration, it's the best way to go. But there are also specialty situations. For example, if you're in a construction contract, most of those under the sort of global model contracts that FIDIC produces are resolved by engineers, not by arbitrators and not by mediators, by the engineer who is selected in advance in the contract by the two parties. So that's quite a specialized situation. So different situations can result in different dispute resolution mechanisms. You also can't, what happens in Vietnam very often is that things drag on. Oh, we can't get to Vietnam to negotiate, so therefore we'll just wait for another 3 weeks and then maybe the virus will go away. But you can't do that. There is a very strict and short period of statute of limitations or prescription period of 2 years under the civil code. It's maybe some cases it'll be 3 years under the commercial law, but you should assume it's only 2 years from when the dispute arose or when it's defined in the contract. So if you go to arbitration, what's the comparison, say, between Vietnam and Singapore? You can choose, if you have a cross-border contract, you're buying goods for export from Vietnam, or you're investing in Vietnam from abroad, you might decide to have arbitration in London or Singapore. My professor of arbitration back at Columbia Law School in New York, Hans Kemp, Hans Schmidt used to say that the best thing to do was to put everybody in a chalet in the Swiss Alps and give them plenty of nice wine and cheese and good food, and they would be very happy, and they would come to a resolution of their dispute very quickly. That was one approach. So we can't quite do that in Vietnam. We have to have our arbitrations at the VIAC offices, but they are very congenial, and they're very, I would say, informal in a way that encourages the parties to speak with each other and have a good result. The other thing about Singapore, if you have arbitration in Singapore for a Vietnam dispute, if the business is really in Vietnam, then it's going to be very hard to go to the court and say, take injunctive relief or emergency measures to say, freeze the bank account or freeze the goods so they're not spoiled or sold off, pending the result of the arbitration. If you're arbitrating in Vietnam, the court in Vietnam will help to back up the arbitration process in Vietnam by freezing assets, freezing bank accounts when you need it. So that's a big consideration to take into account. Another one that all clients want to know about is what's the cost difference between, say, Singapore arbitration and Vietnam arbitration. And I have to say there, it's clearly Vietnam is much more reasonable in terms of costs than as compared to Singapore. Singapore, obviously, it'll cost you about 10 times as much just to get through the first phase of the dispute resolution as compared to VIAC and Vietnam. Now, there are some reasons for that. The arbitrators you get in Singapore, they are world experts on areas of law that are relevant to your contracts. You get some really good arbitrators there, very expert, very experienced. They produce beautiful arbitral awards that are enforceable in any country in the world. In Vietnam, we've only been doing this for so many years and we don't have so much experience. We do rely a lot on the secretariat to make sure that the procedures are followed carefully, and we do everything to make sure that it's an enforceable arbitration award at the end of the day. So if you go to court, the court is say, for example, you're dealing with a party, they've sold you goods, but the goods didn't arrive. So you make your demand and end up, having to go to arbitration to get compensation for your loss. So what if the other party says, no, we're going to go to court? The court should not accept that kind of case. If there's a valid arbitration agreement in your contract, then the court cannot accept that contract. They must give the contract to the arbitration center to resolve. Not all Vietnamese courts know that, and it's very important to anticipate that gap in the knowledge. Sometimes they will take the jurisdiction over the contract, even though they shouldn't, and that's just their natural. They're a court. You can't oust their jurisdiction, and you can't just ignore them. But in fact, they should not take a case according to law. They should not take a case if there's a valid arbitration agreement. That being said, getting a valid arbitration agreement and starting a valid arbitration requires some attention to technical details about powers of attorney. Was the authorization there in place at the time of the contract signing, or was the contract maybe invalid? So sometimes the scope of the arbitration clause will include also the validity and even existence of the contract, which is a bit of a contradiction because if it's sort of a bootstrap, we call it, whereas if the contract itself is not valid, how can the contract itself make itself valid? So that's a little bit of a legal conundrum, but it's very standard procedure to include the existence and validity of the contract in an arbitration award. Another thing I should mention, we skipped over it, is about force majeure. Force majeure, sometimes called the act of God, or sort of unpredictable, unforeseeable event that makes it impossible for the parties to perform their obligations under a contract. Say I had a contract with you to supply 6 million masks and I defaulted and I gave them to someone else because it was easier because of the force majeure. These are very common situations over the last 2 years. But force majeure, you have to look at the details again. Often it will exclude pandemics because of our experience with SARS several years ago. People started to include force majeure to include pandemics. Insurance, too. If you got insurance from a private insurance company that will insure your business operations and insure you for business interruption. That insurance policy usually contains some exclusions like war or maybe strikes or in this case, pandemics. So that language is very tricky and you have to look at it on a case-by-case basis. If you go to court too, you're going to have the risk of an appeal. Whereas if you go to arbitration, you don't generally have an appeal. Often a losing party in arbitration will try to challenge the arbitration result in a court. But usually the courts are supposed to be very deferential to the arbitrators. They should really just help them to enforce the award. And the nice thing about doing an arbitration in Vietnam is that it's enforceable in most countries in the world. In other words, you can take your Vietnam International Arbitration Center award, go to Singapore or New York or London, and take it to the court there, and they will freeze the bank account or other assets of the other party if they have some in that country. So that's a big advantage of the fact that Vietnam is part of the New York Convention. So people, complain that lawyers are always looking about, thinking about the divorce, even at the time of the marriage. But in fact, you just have to think about what could go wrong and address it so that it doesn't go badly wrong. That's very, very common. It's very helpful if you do it. I mentioned, identifying risks in advance, like the Siemens case here in Ho Chi Minh City versus the Metro. That two big, very different kinds of approaches to the contracts. One worked and one didn't. Also, we say horses for courses. There's some horses do well on rocky courses, some do well on flat courses. So here we're saying that we might have an engineer in a construction contract to be the mediator, whereas you need a panel of arbitrators experienced in commercial law or investment law under VIAC to do a contract of that nature. So it depends on the contract nature. Next, also consider the treaty framework. Do you have a possibility of going through an investor-state dispute settlement mechanism, or must you go back to your government for some sort of backup and them to raise your case? Okay. Then let's see, scope of arbitration clause I mentioned. No, not yet. Please go back. Okay. I said extra legal DR still needs a legal basis. So the DR, the dispute resolution, if you're going to have dispute resolution with an engineer or a mediator, these are still not completely covered by the legal framework. So you do still need to take the step of going to court or other legal basis to enforce those awards. I think the last 2 points, one is about Omicron and how damaging that's going to be. I think what we've heard this morning, and I'm an enthusiastic supporter for that, is that it's important to vaccinate people, and that the third vaccination is probably going to be very important in fighting this new variant of the virus. So I'm very glad to see that the government's really going to tackle that, and they're pushing out vaccine already, making a plan to get all you people in this room and people outside it vaccinated with the third shot. So that would really help a lot. Because that's that's what the international investment community is looking for. It's a big issue now. I think the appointment of Dr. Locke as the chair is fantastic because he's always been a very high-profile spokesperson for enterprises, both Vietnamese enterprises and foreign invested enterprises. We worked together many years on the Vietnam Business Forum, and he always makes very good points about the challenges facing businesses in Vietnam. So having him as the chairman is really a good sign going forward that there's always going to be problems and that the government is willing and open-minded about solving them. And that's one other thing. I think we do have a Vietnam Business Forum coming up in January 14th and 15th. Businesses are encouraged to submit through their chambers of commerce, like the Thai Chamber or AmCham or others, if you have issues, not just single company issues, but issues about the rules and regulations that could be better, could be done better. So that's an opportunity. So get to your Chamber of Commerce now, and especially about these questions about arbitration. I'll give you one example of something that we didn't anticipate before COVID, and that was in arbitrations. Usually we have to be in the same room to have an arbitration. You have the three arbitrators, and you have both representatives from both sides in the room. And that's important to be able to, talk clearly. However, with COVID, we couldn't do that. So theoretically, all these arbitrations were stopped. So everybody said, okay, why don't we just do what everybody else is doing? We'll have Zoom calls for arbitrations. So that was okay, except there's a problem, which is that under the current law, both parties have to agree to have the arbitration by Zoom or by digitally. You can't just do it as an alternative because there's a legal blockage to getting together physically. That's a problem because if you're in a dispute, you're not going to be very agreeable to other ways to get hauled to the arbitration. You want to avoid the arbitration. So that's a problem. We should have what I would suggest is when you draft contracts, you put in that in the arbitration clause that arbitration may be held virtually, not just in physical presence. Something to remember in your contract draft. Okay, I'm being told that time's up. If we have questions, please do grab me on the way out or during the coffee. And it's been a pleasure talking to you. Thank you very much.
Xin trân trọng cảm ơn ông Frederick Orbach. Kính thưa quý vị,
ladies and gentlemen, and now we come to the panel discussion.
Để giới thiệu điều phối viên của
So now we will come to the discussion with the participation of our speakers and our guests, to share their thoughts on the question from the participants. Therefore, you can ask questions directly in the room here, or if you participate via Zoom platform, you can leave your question in chat box or Facebook. We will note down your question and we will deliver it to the appropriate speakers. And now I would like to leave the stage for Mr. Châu Việt Bắc, who is the moderator for our panel discussion. Since Mr. Đỗ Mười, I know that the three terms of the presidents of the economy board. So I think that I can easily handle this issue. Regarding investment, we have plenty of statistics and numbers. But if that is the insufficient data, then we cannot ensure a good outcome. For example, the geological 6, give us some information on the natural resources in Vietnam. Because the investor will choose to invest in Vietnam or in Thailand. So please, so this number is for the reference of the investor, to whether they choose to invest in Vietnam or in Thailand. My point here is that we need to establish a digital currency. For sure, we do need the support from our representative here. I have 6 recommendations here. As these smart and digital currency can replace all the fiat currency. It can replace the role of IMF. So you know that IMF, for sure, they will have to work with cash, but this one is the digital currency. And later on, Vietnam will make use of, I think, this strain, to compete, to increase their competitiveness, and develop a IMF-like organization, but with the digital currency. I already received your question, and I have plenty of recommendation here. For example, for the commercial banks, when they offer loans, more than 12-month loans for the farmers, then I think that the offer loan must be more than 12 months. Then it would be, efficient like the way Thai government did. You know that normally our loans is just have the 3 months terms.
Trên 12 tháng hay trên 8 tháng?
Chắc mình còn khoảng xong chưa xong, đúng rồi.
Để đầu tư phải vậy.
Ok, thì trước mắt thì chúng tôi ban tổ chức sẽ ghi nhận cái câu hỏi của.
So I think that we will note down your question and we will soon reply to your inquiry. So due to time restraint and this is a hybrid event which is conducted both offline and online. So I think that I will spend time for all the questions.
Rồi thì có lẽ thì xin mời ban tổ chức trực tiếp điều phối.
So I think that now we will proceed with the question for our speakers today, especially the question in the online platform.
Còn nếu câu hỏi quý vị nào có những cái câu hỏi trực tiếp.
And for sure, for the people here, if you have any question for our speaker, you can raise hand. My name is Vang. First of all, I don't have any question, but I have a comment from my observation, especially for the current situation in Vietnam. You know that climate change is heavily affected Vietnam, especially in the Mekong Delta, for example, sea level rise or solar intrusion. And the COVID-19 pandemic does not only affect Vietnam, but also the world, especially for the Vietnamese crisis, including business. And the scales of impact we already heard from the speakers, for example, like lack of material, supply chain disruption, and so on. And we know that Vietnam is one of these agricultural economy. We have plenty of agricultural products like husk, rice, and many others. So I don't understand why Vietnam is an agricultural economy, but we don't have any factory make use of biomass energies, but we have to import coal from China. And it is estimated that in 2019, there is more than 14 tons of coal imported from China, which is equal to $4 billion. However, if we make use of biomass, we still import biomass for the countries like Singapore, Taiwan, Hong Kong, Japan, and Korea, who doesn't have plenty of resources. And you know that if we make use of biomass, it will leave much carbon footprint to the environment. For example, if we burn charcoal, it will, emit plenty of CO2. And I do believe that biomass is a renewable energy, and coal is a fossil fuel energy. And in the COP21 in Paris, we already committed that in 2030 to reduce 10% of CO2, which is the national determined goal. And in 2050, we will eliminate charcoal in our energy mix. And after that, with the support of international industry, we will try to increase the share of renewable energy higher, up to 25% or even 50%. And in COP26, Vietnam promised to cut down 30% of CH4. And I know that some businesses already have the factory signed with the local government. For example, the farmers, they bring their rice, and then after processing, the factory will, take over the husk, and then we use that husk, to as a biomass source, to produce energy. Or even if we taking regarding the rubber tree, we can use it as natural resources as well. So I still quite wonder about the policy of Vietnam toward the sustainable development, especially in terms of using biomass instead of charcoal. Thank you. So thank you for your question.
Về phía các câu hỏi của quý vị theo dõi sự kiện hôm nay thì chúng tôi cũng nhận được một số các câu hỏi.
From the question via participant on the online platform, first of all, I would like to ask Mr. Tharadubi Sen Adi Chawit regarding to your presentation on the Thai investors in Vietnam. So in your presentation, you already present the difficulties as well as present the solution for Thai investor, to overcome the COVID-19 pandemic. And you quite optimistic in terms of the Thai investment into Vietnam market, and you believe that the number is I remember the rank is 5th in the Vietnamese market. So I believe that is a very positive signal. So there is one question for you. In the time to come, which sectors Thai investor expect to invest in Vietnam market? So I think that you share some of these points or this question as a representative from ThaiCham.
Yes, thank you. So the first sector that I think Thai investor will pay attention is manufacturing, because Vietnam have so many FTA, right? Even much more than Thailand. So whatever product we produce in Vietnam can send to Japan or even Europe at a cheaper import tax. So those manufacturing, and moreover in Thailand now we cannot find labor anymore. We have about 5 million Myanmar's labor in Thailand, and then still shortage. So I think manufacturing will be the number one that they have to move here, especially Vietnam local consumption is growing, market is booming. Number two will be the energy. Energy will be renewable energy and also the gas-fired power plant. From our statistic of ThaiCham, we found that there is few 10,000 of LNG project that we are waiting for Vietnam government approval if we get approval. Yeah, and another one is a retail business. Even though already too big from Thailand already here, but not enough. Many big ones still want to come more. For example, if you can see, right, recently Macro in Thailand, which is really big in Thailand, they also want to look for a long time to come to Vietnam, but the land price in Vietnam is so high. So I believe that after COVID, there will be some move, on all these three main sectors. Yeah, thank you.
Vâng, cảm ơn phần chia sẻ của ông Adi Travis về những cái lĩnh vực thì cụ thể là những lĩnh vực liên quan đến lao động thì có lĩnh vực liên quan đến ngành dệt may, và thứ hai là liên quan đến đầu tư những cái lĩnh vực năng lượng tái tạo. Thì sở dĩ như vậy thì có lẽ là các nhà đầu tư FDI Thái Lan thì đánh cái giá cao cái nguồn lực nhân lực lao động tại Việt Nam, và đặc biệt là Việt Nam là một quốc gia rất là năng động, phải nói trong khu vực về cái việc độ mở về hội nhập kinh tế quốc tế. Thì tại sự kiện ngày hôm nay thì cũng có anh Nguyễn Anh Dương, thì đại diện phía CM, thì cũng đã trong cái bài chia sẻ của anh Dương thì cũng nhấn mạnh rất là nhiều về cái việc đó là phải doanh nghiệp trong cái bối cảnh thích ứng trong cái giai đoạn mới thì phải tận dụng tối đa những cái lợi ích từ các hiệp định FTA mà Việt Nam là thành viên mang lại, thí dụ như là CPTPP hay RCEP hay là EVFTA. Thì như vậy thì không biết là chỗ câu hỏi tiếp theo là có lẽ xin mời phần chỗ anh Dương thì cũng có thể là chia sẻ thêm tiếp là với những cái doanh nghiệp nước ngoài á, thì khi mà họ lựa chọn đầu tư tại Việt Nam á, thì cái độ mở của Việt Nam khi mà tham gia những cái FTA á, thì sẽ giúp thành công như thế nào cho các Việt Nam trong cái việc thu hút đầu tư nước ngoài, đặc biệt là tận dụng các cơ hội FTA này trong cái bối cảnh sắp tới.
Vâng, xin cảm ơn anh Bắc. Tôi cũng đã...
So thank you for your question. And as I mentioned in my presentation, I would like to briefly go through this again. First of all, the fact that when the foreign investor, when they come to Vietnam and they make use of the FTA, I think that is the very important point. Because if you can make use of FTA, which means that the products from Vietnam will, have a better, simpler procedure when it is exported to other countries. And I believe that it will create a very promising potential for Vietnam, especially for foreign investor. And for example, if the foreign business, if they want to enter a market and they have to establish a commerce representative office, then it will be very challenging for them. So when they join in Vietnam and with the benefit from the FTA, I think there would be a great plus. And regarding the import and export market, Vietnam participates in plenty of FTA. Vietnam does not only participate in the CPTPP, but also in many other bilateral and free trade agreements. So by giving those examples, I believe that each free trade agreement have its different regulation and have its different preferential tax. And for the foreign investor in the manufacturing industry, depends on their capacity and depends on their supply chain ability, so that they can have different options, to access a Japanese market, which means that they not only make use of one agreement, but also 4 agreements. So I think that it is an advantage for foreign investor. And the third point, with the next generation FTA, which is focusing on, therefore, Vietnam will improve their policy, to ensure transparency, or to ensure that these policy won't, increase the cost for the foreign investor. Maybe Vietnam will allow the foreign investor, to follow the international treaty, or if there is some provision or some clause that is in line with the Vietnamese regulations, then Vietnam would also permit investor to do so. And one of the important points from the representative of VIAC is that there were new mechanisms, to protect the legitimate right of foreign investors, especially in case of dispute. And by making use of dispute resolution alternatives, as he mentioned, for example, if you want to protect the businesses, in the level of government, so the management agency needs to be more proactive, incorporated with foreign businesses, to help them to deal with the dispute. So I think these are the 4 main key points that I would like to emphasize. And I don't think that this is the new thing, but we already mentioned this for many years. And I think for the time to come, we can improve this further. Thank you for your sharing, Mr. Nguyen Yu, regarding on how we can utilize in the FTAs in Vietnam for foreign investors. And in the presentation of Mr. Adicevich, I already mentioned sector that is renewable energy, which is highly interested by plenty of participants that have been mentioned by some of our speakers here. And we happen to know that Leon Lee International Limited of Miss Catherine Chung is one of the company that provide services regarding the renewable energy. So, can you elaborate more on the investment in this renewable energy? In particular, what are your recommendations or your comments or your estimation in this energy, in this sector, and whether or not the government, the Vietnam government or the city, what can Vietnamese government and Ho City can provide the FDI investor, especially when investing in the PPP project in this sector?
Your questions, and we also very appreciate that you would like to hear from our sharing about this sector. Actually, we get involved with sustainable energy for about 3 years, and we found that the sustainable energy is one of the big trends that Vietnam do quite well in terms of compared with other Asian countries as well as compared to the world. While you see that increase the number of our wind power projects or solar projects go into connecting to national grids into Vietnam this year. Having said that, we say that the potentials of more developed on these sectors is a lot, and as mentioned by Mr. Hanaburi from High Thames, he also say that many FDI enterprise also look into this sector. Especially Thailand is a very big group of energy investment in Vietnam so far. So we found that Vietnam now more and more open in terms of legal system as well as other mechanism to facilitate all the FDI, especially in the investment into energy sector. And we believe that with the national development plan number 8 already increased the number of sustainable energy into the very big number until 2050. So we believe that in the long run, Vietnam is the very potential and very interesting market for all the foreign investors want to look into Vietnam. For others, facilitations from the government policies as well as the supporting scheme, I believe that Ms. Vân can share with us more about from the government point of view is more accurate than me. Thank you very much.
Cảm ơn phần chia sẻ của chị.
Thank you for your sharing. So I think that Ms. Vân, as a representative for Ho Chi Minh City, whether you can share with us a little bit more on the policy or some direction that Ho Chi Minh City plan, to adopt to support the FDI investors. So, ladies and gentlemen, currently Ho Chi Minh City is adopting numerous policies to support the business community, especially foreign investor, In particular, we adopt a new investment provision and a new scheme that Ho Chi Minh City trying to promote in the peak of the COVID-19 pandemic, which is try to create the opportunity, to connect businesses, not only businesses in Ho Chi Minh City but also nationwide. And from then, we will receive their feedback so that we can adjust our plans. For example, in the peak of COVID-19 pandemic, the leadership from the People Committee also meet with the representatives from foreign businesses to hear their feedback on how they implement the 3 on-site policy, the cost issue, and do they have any tax deduction or not. And from those feedback, we already, for sure, if it is in our authority, we will have timely adjustment. For example, we will put those costs, into a different structure. And we also recommend with the central government on the timely policies. For example, at that moment, when the city is implementing the lockdown measure, Đồng Nai, Long Mai, Vũng Tàu also the same. So the president of People Committee also meet with his peer, to ensure, the transportation and make sure that there will be no disruption in the supply chain. And for sure, there's a lot of difficulties. There were a lot of difficulties at that time. And I heard a recommendation that there is some, regulation or some measure that is issues, in just a short time, without giving time for businesses to react. So I think that there is some, for some regulation, for some measure that we have to, issue in such a short time, since there is no way to go around with it. So now, when the pandemic is somehow under control, Ho Chi Minh City, for sure, priority is to focusing on prevention, pandemic control and prevention, and economic recovery. And regarding the pandemic prevention, we're focusing on vaccination and the treatment and the handling of F0 cases. And especially, we always keep in mind that we will, take time, to meet, to have exchange with businesses, to know what they want, what to share, to feedback. And we hope that at the beginning of next year, we would like to revive the disrupted supply chain and in cooperation with other provinces to make sure that the production activities remain normal. And today we also have the participations of representatives of some of the commercial chamber. So I think that in this event, you can, contact with us, directly, and we are willing to be your helping hand to promote your investment in Ho Chi Minh City, from your expansion, from the location, and any difficulties in terms of implementing those policies, or if you want to expand your activities in other provinces. We also act as a bridge, to connect with new partners. And as Mr. and Miss Catherine also mentioned, the renewable energy sector. But I think that this Ninh Thuận, Bình Thuận, it's more like, the gateway of the renewable energy. So ITPC is currently working with some of the stakeholders who is participating directly in those projects. And I hope that via this connection, it will be easier, to help you to connect with those partners going forward. And for sure, for investment project, we need to have a direct discussion so that you can, sort out all of the issues. For example, the Korean and Japanese enterprises poses a question for us regarding the workforce. I think it's not a tough issue. We try as much as possible, to find the factory with, 10,000 factories, since most of their workers have returned to their hometown. So I believe that if you already work here for a long time, if you want, we also consider, the policy for the worker who would like to return to the Ho Chi Minh City, like vaccination or the accommodation. But in the long run, Ho Chi Minh City will prioritize the highly skilled workforce who have expertise in technology and for the normal workforce. But I believe that not only Ho Chi Minh City but also other provinces focuses on this issue as well. So overall, Ho Chi Minh City is make its best efforts, to prevent pandemic and try to cooperate with the provinces. And now we're not working alone, but work in unison with other provinces. And for sure, we do hope to receive your direct order from domestic and FDI enterprises, especially the request to expand your activities in Ho Chi Minh City.
Rất cảm ơn cái phần chia sẻ của chị Vân là đại
diện. So thank you, Ms. Vân, for your sharing, who is a representative of management policy agencies in Ho Chi Minh City. I think that during the COVID-19 outbreak, the connection between enterprises, as Mr. Adi Javid already mentioned, we have create groups, to share information between FDI enterprises. And I think that is one of the advantage that we can utilize in the time that we need to have fast information processing. We need to establish a communication channel to help us connect with our stakeholders and potential partner. And as Ms. Wang mentioned, the impact of COVID for sure does not light on one or any single business, but spread across the nation and the provinces. Therefore, we need a linkage between the authorities, the management agency, to best find the best solution to support the FDI enterprises. And for sure, like Ms. Bang mentioned regarding the workforce, so I think that for the expert, when they come to a province and when they move to another province, they have to perform the quarantine period. For sure, that is not so convenient for their business trip. And I believe that in recent months, Ho Chi Minh City and other provinces in close cooperation has sorted out this issue. And regarding policies and legal regulation, especially with the quick issuance of some regulations, as Mr. Frank has already mentioned, from Clean Dye Company. So I think with such regulation and rules, for sure, it will bring such challenges to companies. And from Mr. Frank's presentation, in his last 40 years of experience, so we can say that it is an unprecedented situation, which we can learn a lot, not only from Mr. Frank, from Clean Dye Company, but also for workers, for managers who work for FDI enterprises. They also know how to cope with COVID-19. And Ms. Vang already shared some point regarding the workforce. And I believe that in the upcoming time, for sure, we will come up with new solutions to ensure a sufficient workforce for FDI enterprises, not only in terms of quantity, but also in terms of quality in comparisons to other countries. And as representative of TiChEM already shared, that it is an advantage of Vietnam. So via the Clean Dye presentation, who using plenty of domestic workers, I would like to ask you a question. Is there any challenge regarding the workforce in the going forward? And do you need what type of support does your company need from the association or from the management agency or from the government level? So could you share with us some of your feedback, some of your suggestions?
start. So we do not have a huge workforce. So fortunately, the problem was not as big as with some of my colleagues. That's the first question. As I said, the coordination of activities in various authorities and various groups of people is an essential thing. I'm really happy to hear in your words and also in Fran's words that this is very high on the priority list. And it's also recognized by everybody that this is an area of improvement. And of course, if such a thing happens like this pandemic, everybody gets caught up. It's the first time. Afterwards, to say, where things went wrong, and we have to learn from this. And as I said, I'm really happy to see how Vietnam is learning from this. In my home country, the decision making is not always very consistent and also sometimes very confusing. At least here in Vietnam, I can see that the authorities are learning, that decision making is getting better. Just reading again on the flying into Vietnam, the changes from that, the quarantine rules. Initially there are 3, 4, 5 messages between 1 day, 3 days, 5 days, but then also quite quickly it's not very clear what. So to me as a business, as I said, we can cope with anything, but we need some time to prepare. And in that context, I think also for this my message here. I'm happy what I experienced. The company has come out more stronger. It has been at a cost, but I could see the improvements, so I'm very positive with that. So if this would happen again, I'm sure it would be better than it was. So, and we can only learn, right? That is the most important part. Thank you.
Tôi thì muốn có một cái câu hỏi thêm cho ông Frank.
Hi Frank, I have another question for you. So I know that you highly appreciate the adaptation of Vietnamese worker in the pandemic. And in your presentation, you said that, for example, if your business is operating in Holland, you cannot work with the 3 on-site with such a 3 on-site policy with the Holland workers. So can you share a bit of the characteristic of Vietnamese workers so that the other FDI enterprises can learn from your experience?
Yes, I can. I think most important is that you get what you give. So if you treat your employees with respect and decency, you will find that your employees will give that back to you. It's not only in Vietnam, for sure, it's actually worldwide, but for sure here in Vietnam, this is very prominent. And I found that the people that work with Clean Dye, a lot of them have been there for as long as me, 5 years, which is not hundreds of years, but like 4 or 5 years. So still, it's nice to see there's dedication, there's a heart for the business. We do things together. We play football, we play bowling. There is a sense. It's a small company. It makes everything easier, of course. There's 200 people rather than 2,000. But it's a pleasure to be here. And the people are dedicated. They work hard. Yeah. As I said, it's of all the countries I lived and worked, it's definitely a pleasure to be here. With and without COVID. So yes, I can recommend anybody to start a business here from a workforce point of view. You would be very well served and very well advised or very pleased in what you find.
Dạ, cảm ơn phần chia sẻ.
Thank you for your sharing.
Tiếp theo thì thông qua những cái sự kiện do chúng tôi tổ chức thì chúng tôi thấy
via our workshop
trong cái bối cảnh Covid thì
in the COVID-19 context,
sự hỗ trợ của
The support of authority and central government plays a very important plays a really important role. But there is a consensus that the support from the government is quite limited due to their resources that they can offer, mainly due to the capacity and the adaptation of the enterprises. So therefore, the flexibility, the agility of business plays an integral part. And one of the solutions that I have heard in plenty of presentation is that we will make use of technologies, in terms of governance and management, ensure preventative measure. And I think that when we speaking of technology, not only in the COVID prevention activity, but also in the dispute resolution as well, you have recommend that you can use a virtual hearing for arbitration. And I think that it is a good initiative. Even us as the PX, we do think that it is a very helpful solution for businesses in the time to come. So in Mr. Frederick's presentation, you have mentioned, that the time to bring it to the arbitration. And for sure, the violation is something that we cannot avoid. One of the regulation that every FDI enterprise must know is that the term to bring the violation to any authorized body. It can be court, arbitrators, or other agency. So I have one question for you. Mr. Fred has mentioned about the term of the contracts in case of dispute. For example, if the term of contract is invalid, is there any way for the FDI investor to protect their legitimate interests in case the contract terms is invalid? So I think that we can see for sure that you will have some solution for our businesses.
Sure. Just because a contract is not valid under contract law doesn't mean that you don't have some protection under civil law. There's a whole chapter in the Civil Code on non-contractual damages. So, for example, if you relied reasonably on an oral promise from another counterparty and that party breached, then you may be entitled to compensation, maybe not the profit, but the compensation of the money that you gave them. In other words, without a valid contract, you may have some rights, but they won't be as strong as the rights you would with a valid contract. I hope that answers the question. There's another trend. We're talking about trends in terms of digital and that kind of thing. There's another trend that I think is a little we have to watch out for at VIAC and others in Vietnam, which is that many parties to arbitration clauses, they are stipulating an unusual provision, which is that the arbitrators in the case of arbitration cannot be from either the country of either of the parties. So if you had a Singaporean and a Vietnamese parties to an arbitration, they couldn't, if those were the parties to the contract, they couldn't use a Singapore arbitrator or a Vietnamese arbitrator. But the contract itself may be governed by Vietnamese law. So that means you have to choose an arbitrator from another country, maybe American, maybe Dutch, something else. But they wouldn't necessarily know about Vietnamese law very much. Some of us have studied Vietnamese law for many years, but it's not common. So I think we should take a look at this issue and see what the policy of VIAC is going to be about determining the nationality of arbitrators that way. It seems to me it's hard to have a panel. You can always request evidence from the parties regarding the Vietnamese law applicability to a certain issue. That's possible. So you don't absolutely need, arbitrators from Vietnam, but it would be helpful to have at least one on the panel.
Cảm ơn phần chia sẻ của ông Fred Berg là.
Thank you, Mr. Frederick Berg. He is also an arbitrator of VIAC and who is participating in the dispute resolution of VIAC and others international arbitration center. So, Ms. Fred answered regarding to the terms of the contract. So, I would like to add up from our experience in VIAC. Currently, Vietnamese law stipulates that when you bring it to arbitration or court, the arbitrator panel or the judgment panel will still review your application and can still come to the final judgments for your case. And if the give the reason that the contract term is invalid to the application, then the arbitration panel or the judgment panel can decide or can elaborate on whether the contract is invalid or not. So if there is no appeal regarding the terms of contract, I believe that the case will be proceeded at normal. And in the second part of Mr. Frederick answer, he mentioned about make use of other international arbitration in dispute resolution. And here, if, for example, if you are an investor from US, Singapore, Korea, Japan, you may choose arbitrator from other countries around the world to participate in your arbitrator panel. Then the seat of jurisdiction may be different. It can be Singaporean law or maybe the American law, and I think it's not rare, it's not uncommon in the real practices. And another question, and I believe that this question is very important. Frederick has compared the procedures, the arbitration procedure between Vietnam, VIAC and SIAC. So as a long established law firm, so can you tell us when we should choose Vietnamese arbitrator and when we should choose international arbitrator? I think that this question, Ms. Catherine Chung already mentioned, since you already have some cross-border contract, as the dispute resolution provision is very important. The force majeure provision is very important in the new context when there is a contract or transaction between FDI enterprises and domestic enterprises. So please, Mr. Fresh.
This is a topic that we could go on for hours about, so I'll just make one very brief comment, which is I think you always want to choose arbitrators who understand the subject matter of the dispute. In particular, we see different kinds of contracts in Vietnam arbitration. One very common one is a contractor or designer of a hotel or resort doesn't get paid, and they continue to work on the project. And finally, the amount gets very high and they have no choice but to go to arbitration to get repaid. In those cases, they tend to be very technical because the construction standards, whether the building has been in compliance with the agreed standards. It's something that an engineer under a construction contract or design contract would be better to adjudicate than a commercial lawyer, for example. So that's just an example where you really have to, it's horses for courses. You want to choose the arbitrator who has construction experience, and you don't necessarily need all three of them to be from that. In fact, you don't want that, because then they would be too sympathetic to the contractor's point of view and not the owner's point of view. But you need one who's responsible and can articulate the rules of that particular area of law. So that's helpful. Language is also an issue. As soon as you have foreign arbitrators on the panel, then you usually need to talk about doing the arbitration in a foreign language. And VIAC has been very good and very disciplined about enforcing the parties' agreement. We had in the early days, a few years ago, we had some parties saying, no, this is Vietnam, you have to use Vietnamese in arbitration. But that's not what the law says. The law says you can choose the language of the arbitration between the parties. And if you choose it, you stick with it. That's been very helpful, actually. So, and back to the original question, it's horses for courses. You really have to look at the particular circumstances of each dispute and then start your choice that way. It's very common that a VIAC does the appointment, right? As you know, sometimes a party just ignores the request for appointing an arbitrator, the respondent, and they leave it to VIAC to do that for them. And the law allows that too. They can appoint a valid arbitrator that way. So, yep, keep up the good work.
Dạ. Chắc chắn là một điều rằng là thủ tục trọng tài là một cái thủ tục rất là linh hoạt, rất là mềm dẻo.
The arbitration procedure is very flexible.
Và trọng tài là một bản chất là một cái dịch vụ giải quyết.
And I believe that arbitrator is the dispute resolution service.
Cho nên là cái việc mà chúng tôi là một cái tổ chức trọng tài hay là các tổ chức trọng tài khác.
So I believe that VIAC or the arbitration center always prioritize that, how we can support best to parties to ensure it's in a more convenient and transparent way. And, bring the most transparent solutions and judgment for parties. So I wonder if Ms. Catherine Chung have any add up to Mr. Frederick comment. Since your company already have some transaction with Singapore and you are a Singaporean-based business.
Actually, we are the consulting firm, so we deal with many foreign companies where they tend to refer to you SIAC over VIAC. And also would like to have more clarification from VIAC to see whether if any differences or any circumstance that other foreign investor may change their point of view to choose VIAC instead of SIAC like normally they used to do. From our experience when working with a foreign entity, we found that the contractually normally we follow with Vietnam law, but when go to the negotiation to choose which one to follow for the arbitration, so they always refer to choose SIAC over VIAC. So that's one of the big questions that we also would like to see whether how our VIAC make our more so-called reputations for other investors, especially for FDI, to feel more comfortable and feel more convincible and feel safe when going with the Vietnam's International Arbitration Center. Thank you.
Ok, cảm ơn phần chia sẻ của chị Trần. Thì Thì thật ra thì đây là một cái vấn đề cũng khá nhiều cái diễn đàn của chúng tôi.
I think that's this topic we have been touched on many of our workshops. And each center will have their own strengths, and for the contracting parties will have their own, perceptions on how they would choose the party, to resolve the dispute. As Mr. Frederick has already mentioned, we don't have a one-size-fits-all solution. It would be it would be a case-by-case solution to ensure the best effectiveness for the businesses. And in today's workshop, we also have the participation of Mr. Rudy Van Roy, who is the CEO of the DBVA. So I would like to ask that from the perspective of an association or from the FDI enterprise perspective. What is your solution as well as your plans going forward, to assist your members in adapting with COVID-19 pandemic and ensuring that they have safe operations and productivities in Vietnam? So I hope to hear your perspective.
Well, thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir, and thank you for your question. As far as Dutch businesses are concerned, we're quite confident about the future. I have to say, I think that there were lots of, let's say, complaints from Dutch companies about how things used to be going, especially, for example, what Mr. Frank highlighted about the overnight decisions and the very little adaptation time. That was very difficult for Dutch businesses. But in my conversations and engagements with Dutch businesses, I am seeing that they're confidently looking ahead to the future. As far as DBAV's plans is, we are looking for more and deeper connections with the Vietnamese authorities, doing our best to facilitate a continuous dialogue between the Ho Chi Minh authorities or between the Vietnamese authorities. For example, there are now some investors that have a few problems in June. That is something that we try to play a facilitating role in, a few high-level discussions. Of course, we do that together with the Eurocham as well and with our embassy and consulate general. So going forward, hopefully with open borders, I am looking to be a host of that continuous dialogue, and I'm seeing here today that you are basically doing the same, and it's a very engaging discussion. I was actually just writing a report about it, so I think it's very useful, and I hope that the people online and in this room are with me. Thank you.
Xin cảm ơn. Xin cảm ơn ông Rudy Van Roy.
Thank you, Mr. Rudy Van Roy, for your sharing. The next question is for Mr. Nguyễn Anh Dương. A FDI enterprise asked you a question. FDI enterprises creating advantages and benefits for. So the question is, which FTA create the best benefits for the FDI enterprises? And to best utilize these FTIs, what are the things to consider? Thank you, Mr. Bach, for your question. From my point of view, when we're comparing the benefits between different FTA, I think it's very difficult. And when I provide consultancy for business, I always emphasize that we should consider FTAs in a as a big picture. And when I mentioned the RCEP, when it's going to have come to effective in the 1st January of 2022, I emphasized that the FDI enterprises should focusing not only in one single FTA, but also put it in the broader context. So as an export or import business, the main thing is that you will try to penetrate as many as markets as possible, right? So either it's RCEP, CPTPP, EPFTA, we can make use of it. And many companies consider that RCEP is a much, easier agreement to follow. So, like 3 years ago, many American businesses consider that the Chinese market is not so doesn't have any strict, standard. However, recently, if you are an exporter in the agriculture industry sector, you can see that there are plenty of hurdles when you export your products into the Chinese market. Therefore, which FTA bring best benefits? I think it's very difficult to answer. But to ensure the competitiveness of enterprises, even those for enterprise with the advantages on technology, I think that we should focus on CPTPP, EVFTA. So the sooner you prepare, the better result you have. And if you can meet the requirement and the standard from the CPTPP, and I think that it is no difficult, to meet the requirement from RCEP. So I think that no matter how much a profit you earn from the RCEP, if you can still make use of CPTPP and EPFTA, and you ignore the opportunity from RCEP, and I don't think that you can have the best outcome that you expected. Therefore, the FDI enterprises should consider all opportunities from all FTAs. Don't look FTAs as a single opportunity. And I think for enterprises already have plenty of experience in terms of chain management or have the long supply chain across the world. I think that I think that it would be a great benefit for them, to make use of all the FTA. But for the SME, for the business who have some issues in accessing finance, maybe you can use to meet some of easier, so-called easier requirement or agreement, and from then you can grow your business, and then to a certain state level, then you will move up to a stricter standard. So I think that all the FTAs are there. The thing is that what is your strategy? How can you ensure that your strategy fit best to the FTAs? Therefore, it should be back to the preparation of the businesses. And I think the hardest part is that how enterprises can show adaptability. What do I mean by adaptability? Since there is a lot of increasing demand in the market, so you need to be prepared for new demand. However, it must be consistent. So what do I say consistent? I mean that if we have an agreement with US for the seafood industry, we can make plenty profit. However, up to 2017 and 2018, many seafood companies don't invest in their technologies, but they use the profit from export, to focusing on land for infrastructure, and they forgot their core technologies. So the thing is that your strategy must be flexible, but also consistent to ensure that you can make use of your best strengths. Because if we, deep dive into standards, requirement, workforce quality, and I think it's a lengthy discussion. I believe that our enterprise is already aware of that topics, issues. Thank you for your sharing. So, according to plan, we will conclude our workshop at 11:30 this morning, and we have received plenty of questions via the online form, and we deliver to our speaker after the event. So, I think that last 2 minutes, I would like to ask another question. I wanted to spend time for one question from our participant here in our room today. If not, then we will conclude the Q&A session.
Như vậy thì tôi nghĩ rằng là trong một cái khoảng thời gian ngắn trong buổi sáng.
I think in just a short time, just in this morning, with two main two main topics covered by many presentation from representatives from the Foreign Business Association, FDI Enterprises, and law firm or VIAC arbitrators, for example, like Mr. Frederick Burke, and from Mr. Nguyen Dung, representative of TDM, Ms. Vong, on behalf of the ITPC in Ho Chi Minh City. I see that even though it's a short amount of time, but we can still have lots of insightful and valuable information. So once again, I would like to express my appreciation for your participation this morning, both offline and online. And once again, thank you for taking your precious time and joining with us, especially our speakers, our distinguished guests, to help the FDI enterprises will have a better perspective and solutions going forward. And I would like to thank Ms. Vong, who is also the co-organizer, working with us, closely with us, to create more workshop to update information for our businesses. So on behalf of the organizing committee and Ms. Vong, I would like to conclude our conference today. Once again, thank you so much for your participation.
Recording stopped.